From the tops of these trees, I can see the whole world. The jagged needles pop out like a rib cage, standing silently, somewhere between the flooding earth and the spinning moon, closing slowly over the dull, pulsing heart of the forest. A familiar predator, engulfing and snapping everything in and letting nothing out. This is where I lead us. This is where you long to be. From this icy cavern, I can feel your whole pulse. Close to the ground from which you came, yearning to return, naked and starving like the day you were born. White like a corpse, lips blue like the sky. Here is where I trap you. Here is where I let you go. Into the darkness, safe and slow. Into the wilderness, we go.
Jen and I originally, we sought out to write a Disney-style musical. Somewhere along the line, the Disney musical took a very dark turn. So this cute little Disney musical kind of morphed into what became Lost Walks, which has been described as dark and macabre. We talked about a larger concept album. There's a lot of concept albums that don't necessarily go from A to B and don't necessarily tell like a narrative story in succession like that, but we just felt that it was the easiest way to kind of get our point across by telling a narrative tale.
The sky at dawn, I go hunting almost anything alive. It's the littlest.
And it kind of challenged me to do some things that I hadn't done previously as a songwriter. So as a songwriter who always was kind of traditionally used to writing 2-3 minute songs, to be able to write a 45-minute piece that became a rock opera is, it means a lot to me that I can be a part of that.
It wasn't my idea. I probably would never suggest anything so crazy. There were characters, and then we were talking about character arcs, things that I'd never talk about when writing rock songs. Artistically, it's important to put yourself in a situation that you're not comfortable, so you're always pushing yourself.
There's blood on the tall grass from the arms of slow.
We wanted to make this happen, so we just started writing it in this room. It felt like a really natural progression to then ask Damien to come in and help us with the lyrics. And we had these bare bones songs that the three of us had going for a while.
We bunkered down for a year, just kind of getting these songs tight and how we wanted them to sound. After a year, when we liked where we were, then we started inviting other musicians to come in and fill it out a little bit.
Neither myself nor Jen nor Damien are super classically trained musicians, but we augmented the band with people who are. So we had ideas and we had a vision, and the people that came in and learned those songs,
we knew that they would fill in these pieces that we weren't capable of doing ourselves.
My band Faceman played a show with Andy, and we were just chatting about it after the show, and I just said, if you ever want to have a project, maybe we could do something. And he said, well, I'm in this project, Lost Walks, that we wrote, and we'd love to have you come in and try some upright bass on some stuff.
I met Andy, strangely enough, at Performers Expo in Fort Benton, Montana.
And back up this bark.
We moved out here.
Pound for pound, this is one of the most talented bands I've been in. Every musician is unbelievably talented.
On accident, we got pretty much the best band we could have gotten.
Everybody's amazing except for Andy. He's a real jerk. Just kidding.
The musicians in Lost Walks, can't say enough. They're super geniuses. Some of the greatest musicians I've ever known. They're professional musicians for the most part. Like, music is what they do. Every musician is involved with other projects. And they're just great, amazing people. They're cool people. It makes sense that they're in numerous projects because you can't be an asshole and work with that many people.
They're also invested in a lot of different projects, and they're also talented. It makes us feel really lucky that they're choosing to work with us on this too.
Get by the blacker night when the morning comes.
I feel really inspired by how dedicated they are. It's been validating to work on a project like this where it feels like a real collaboration, where there are moments where maybe Andy and I can't be involved because of other life things. They kind of just swoop right in and take over and keep moving with the project, and it feels really good. It feels like that's what something like this should be. They, I hope, are being fulfilled by it somehow as well.
We feel like school children. No, you know, I mean, we really do when we're around each other. We have a lot of fun.
It's fun because I think a lot of us respect each other's work in other projects. And so it's cool to kind of come together on a project and be able to play together. There's a lot of folks in that group that I admire quite a bit musically.
I think we're all beyond the kind of youthful, take my ball and go home kind of situation. We're all just, pretty mature in our musical identities.
And it's really cool to see what other people are coming up with. I think that's the other thing that makes me want to keep going with this.
I've been in 350 bands in Denver, and I've barely ever had that connection with people.
A man and a woman. They move to the woods. They're getting out of their city life to go be a little bit more isolated. We meet the wolf character, and he's explaining that he's a lone wolf, and he's always been alone. That's when he's already been stuck in a trap.
Last time I got close to death, I looked it right in the jaws.
He's kind of a tortured, lonely, sad, and injured animal. You get a glimpse into what's actually going on within the relationship of the woman and the man. The man is kind of explaining, this is complicated, I have feelings that I don't really want to be here with her. The woman is desperate for something but doesn't know what it is. And that's when she runs into the wolf, where she sees that he's stuck in the trap.
Saw the trap till it snapped. I heard when it sprang.
She lets him out, and then that's where this relationship starts between the wolf and the woman. The wolf becomes kind of protective of her because she's helped him get out of a desperate situation. The wolf and the woman are kind of imagining what it would be like to get out of their current situation. The woman is imagining, like, God, what would it be like if I were free like a wolf and I could exist in this pack where I'm supported and loved? And at the same time, the wolf is imagining, what would it be like if I had a family and I wasn't alone anymore? They're imagining this in their heads, but the real story is that the wolf is kind of watching over the woman, and the woman is aware that the wolf is there. She's also aware that the man is now seeing this wolf as a threat to their family. The wolf discovers that the woman is pregnant. The man kind of mentions it, like, now that you're about to have a baby, I definitely don't want to do this with you anymore. Close to the end of the record, deciding that they need to get out. They need to get out of this situation. The man feels like he needs to do that by getting rid of the wolf and the woman and the baby. And then the woman decides she needs to kind of enlist the wolf in helping her get out. And the wolf is deciding, I don't really care about my own life anymore. I want to save this woman. There's this wild fight scene. The man and the wolf, they both end up dying, and the woman is set free, basically. Now my suffering is famous.
I think the album itself is just kind of it's a brief narrative about kind of maybe a couple days in the life of this wolf, this woman, this man. Oh man, I'm having a hard time with this. Sorry, it started so good.
It's okay, because I actually disagree, right? Okay. Like, this is what's been so interesting about talking about the record after it's all done and all the way through, because Andy sees the record happening in a few days, and I see it happening in a year, you know, more like a time span of a few months. It is interesting to kind of reflect on how all of us have gone through this process, and we even still, it's complicated in the way we're thinking on it. So I think it's fine that you keep messing up. Kind of dark. I don't have a real reason why that exists in my life other than I just like it.
The story itself lends itself to this type of mood. You know, you have a couple that's isolated in the middle of the woods. You want to write things that have some minor notes and some dark, somber tones to them. And yeah, like I said, from having it start and wanting it to be a lighthearted Disney musical to having it kind of turn into a super dark, creepy rock opera, like I'm not sure where the shift was, but of course once we realized the story we were trying to tell, you know, we couldn't have Gaston and what other Disney characters there are. Beauty, the Beast,
it felt a
all those
little
ones.
bit more authentic for us.
And I remember when we met, those eyes were the prettiest ones. Golden blue.
We couldn't write an entire rock opera that was totally doomy, maybe to make it feel a little bit more complex like the characters were. It felt like the songs called for some lightheartedness, and even the songs that sound lighter are still a bit crazy lyrically.
Prettiest one starts very bright and happy because it's supposed to be kind of the slide into his thought process. With my character specifically, it's supposed to start everything's fine, and then the first thought that he has that's negative is, hopes a child be born, now that one lives in her now, I've never felt so torn.
Deeper in love we fell when I told my mother of the news. She hoped a child be born. Now that one lives in you now, I've never felt.
That's like the first thought that goes into his head. And from there, it's supposed to be him sliding progressively further into this thought process that's unhealthy. It ends with him, you know, completely losing it. He's supposed to have kind of one more moment of realization in the song Plan, where he talks about maybe this is the wrong thing. It's another side of him starting to come back out. It's supposed to represent like different sides of someone's thoughts.
While you can, I'm lovesick.
I hope they don't mean much personally. I've written some pretty dark, creepy stuff. My mom's pretty horrified with some of the subject matter on it. To me personally, the lyrics, they don't touch on anything personally that I feel, but I'm proud of kind of the poetry, if you want to call it that, the artistry behind it. I mean, it's definitely some dark stuff, but I like the way it turned out.
I feel like the writing process for me was a bit surprising, that some of the lyrical content did feel like it reflected a bit of my actual life. First song, there's a phrase where I mention I left my family home, and basically like I'm out here with you and I left my family home, and even though, you know, I miss my family dearly, I don't feel like that was a mistake. I moved here from New Jersey. And
Colorado represents the snowy wilderness.
yeah, so there are surprisingly a lot of things that do reflect my real life, and maybe a little bit of La Loba feels that way for me. Like I feel I always want more out of everything, out of life. So, and I don't think that's a bad thing for me, I don't think that's an awful thing for me to admit.
There's always a little bit of your personality, I guess, in anything, whether it's directly pertaining to anything that actually happens in the story, or just when you write from a different character's perspective, yeah, there's always a little bit of you in that, and it makes that writing process easier. Again, I hope I'm not a homicidal, crazy maniac, but that part that's always been drawn to like watching things like that, or, you know, I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts and I like horror movies and things like that. So although it's not directly me, you know, it's drawing from experiences that I've had in the past.
Got a plan.
So we've always wanted to work with Damien. We worked with him, our other band, Dust Heart, had a song that we had guest vocals from him on. It was called Simple Solution. That was kind of what started us really wanting to work with Damien. So when we started to think about this concept of having a wolf, we just really thought that Damien was like the perfect, originally antagonist, kind of this deep, dark, tortured figure.
Someone like Damien really bringing the voice of the wolf to life. I think he really like maintained the essence of what a wolf would be, that it would be an aggressive, wild animal. Damien's brought this wolf to life in a very like real, fierce way. He's brought this wolf into the story without ever sacrificing any of its like real essence of being a wolf.
Vocally, it's been a long, strange road. I've never, I guess, been confident with my voice. I've never considered myself a singer. I kind of got my foot in the door with punk rock band, singing with punk rock, which luckily you don't have to sing. You just have to be an asshole and scream, and I had that in spades. So I started singing punk rock, and then my last band, Bad Luck City, I kind of experimented with, again, not singing, standing in front of a microphone and making sounds and telling stories.
It's fun too to play music with him, you know, and with everybody, but he is like such this cool force on stage that it's really fun to rock out.
Damien was a big inspiration in us kind of moving forward with Lost Walks and the project in general.
Inspired by wolves, but not enough. So we went down to Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center to meet some wolves and find out some more about kind of their culture. I feel like if I had visited zoos before and then when I come to Colorado Wolf and Wildlife Center, it feels very different for me. Like getting a tour, learning where the animals are coming from. I've never heard why the animals live at zoos before, and hearing these specific animals' stories, why they've ended up here, where they came from. Right. It just feels like such a different thing to me. I do not know why I feel so lost. We did this really special thing where we got to go into a wolf's enclosure and we got to meet 2 different wolves.
I do have some of Micah's hair all over me. I just came in from giving people what we call an alpha experience, where we go in and take people in to visit wolves. When I leave, these people are on such a high having experienced the wolf, and every one of the 4 people I was just in got a kiss by Micah, which means he washed their face.
In that time, we learned about what was going on with wolves, how people were still trapping them. These really sad things that we didn't realize was still happening right now.
I hope that when they look at the pictures that they take home with them, that they remember the information on the tour, that they remember these wolves. Everything we do here is really about their wild relatives.
Are wolves considered an endangered species in the U.S. now?
In parts of the U.S., yes. There are places where they are no longer protected. States have the right. At one point in time, this was back in the 1800s, there was a decision made that we wanted to get rid of all the predators, especially the wolves. Not only in Colorado, but practically everywhere in the U.S. Main reason for that was to make room for cattle and make it a little easier to run cattle and sheep and other livestock on the land.
Yellowstone in particular, biologists have really paid a lot of attention to that area since wolves were taken away from Yellowstone. They've seen a ton of ecological damage that has happened to Yellowstone, and there's been a lot of efforts to repair that damage. Wolves, as the apex predator, top of the food chain. If you take them away, you're going to see effects all the way down the line, right down to our root systems, down to our watersheds and our wetlands. Yellowstone saw hundreds of species disappear or start to disappear over the years. If the elk have no reason to move because there's no wolves chasing them, they'll start to form these mega herds down in valleys, down in places that are really easy for them to be, and they'll just overgraze. They'll eat everything, and they'll chew on the bark of the trees if they have nothing else to do. When you introduce wolves back to the ecosystem, you start to see the elk herds breaking apart, starting to move back up into the mountains where they ought to be, giving that ecosystem a chance to return and grow back. But if they're eating everything right down to the dirt, you're going to see, for example, a big one is beavers. If beavers don't have access to the trees that they need to build their dams, then they're going to start moving out of that area. And if you don't have beaver dams, you don't have wetlands. If you don't have wetlands, you don't have hundreds and hundreds of species there too. So
eventually, during Nixon's administration, we created some laws, the Endangered Species Act. That culminated in the reintroduction of wolves in Yellowstone and parts of Idaho. Because of that great success and controversy, there has been a lot of polarizing opinions when it comes to wolves.
So back in the 14th century in Europe, they were dealing with the bubonic plague. Wolves coming in to investigate what free buffet was happening. And they were seen taking pieces of people and tasting it. And so Europeans started viewing wolves as man-eating beasts. And they were very fearful of them.
Most people are very fearful of them. They're portrayed in a bad light, the big bad wolf.
We've all heard Three Little Pigs, The Big Bad Wolf, Little Red Riding Hood. Those stories are centuries old. And the fear is so powerful of the wolf that those stories are still prevalent today, and we still hear them. It's lasted that long.
We realized that we were being maybe a little irresponsible with how we were portraying our wolf in the story. He was originally an evil character. Wolves are wildly misunderstood. We feel like we have a responsibility to help represent what they could actually be. If we can rethink on how they exist and how they communicate, and that we're all kind of here to help each other. And maybe it represents just a way of being a little bit more open-minded and rethinking all the things that we feel like we already know.
There's wolves that have been introduced in Montana, Wyoming, and New Mexico, but Colorado's the missing link. I think the story itself, it's a creative way of putting together a story that involves a wolf as a main character.
And we kind of felt like we owed it to this animal that's so misunderstood.
Yeah, and we work with a lot of organizations that do a lot to change that narrative. Rocky Mountain Wolf Project is an organization that we're working with now who their sole mission is to kind of bring the wolf back to Colorado and change that narrative of the wolf being a villain, and they're trying to do things, with ranchers or anyone who may have that stigma about wolves being evil, and ways to have them back into the ecosystem so we can all kind of benefit from it.
And to listen to kind of the perspective of the wolf, I think is something that is difficult for people to digest, but it's important because we're personifying the wolf, and so we understand that it is a living thing, that it does deserve a place in the ecosystem, and that we need to pay attention to it.
So Alvino is the photographer. A lot of the panels uses his photography. And then Liz Holland was the original artist who made these little tiny paintings on cardboard that were then transferred onto the big panels. The way that Alvino and Liz were working too is we sent them the songs and then we sent them the lyrics and kind of talked a little bit casually about what all the songs were about and what the mission of the band was. And they passed them along to Justin and Katie, and then they made them into the panels. And then they have done a lot of the big set design type stuff that we've used for the big productions, because they have started their own business with Insight and have to take a lot of other projects on, and they were definitely volunteering with us. Justin has taken a step back from his work with Lost Walks. Since that moment, we've kind of put the call out there just to our friends, knowing that there were some people who had interest in what we were doing with the artwork in Lost Walk. Damien had a friend named Chucky Martinez who is now kind of stepped into doing some of the work, and he's doing a lot with our show that we have in a few few weeks. Some of the challenges that we had there were, how do we come up with things that'll work for the show? And he's come in right quick with some solutions. So he's working on it now. And we've got another new friend who's doing some light design type stuff and projections that he's working on. And then one other person, one of our dancers, her dad is involved with art and construction, and he'd shown some interest, so he has kind of joined our art team in the way that he's supporting us with a lot of different ideas on how we can make things work for our big productions. And another thing that we've worked on recently too is we had a friend of ours who's a tattoo artist in town. He designed a t-shirt for us, and it was really cool to see what he came up with and kind of what his perspective is on Lost Walks, something that I would not have thought of.
I think it's good that we have some new perspective on, especially the artistic and kind of the set design part of Lost Walks, because we had always talked about taking whatever we started with and building upon that and making it bigger and making it grander. We loved the team that we had to start, but I think that's kind of evolved into a different perspective. So new people coming in, as we continue to evolve as a band, as we continue to evolve with the music we write, we want new perspective and we want people to be able to enhance the story as it progresses, because we have a lot of plans to continue this story. And we look at Lost Walks as a community, and anyone who contributes as part of the band. So the more people that can come in and the more people that can contribute and help enhance the thing that we're trying to get moving along, we definitely always appreciate that. I think other people's perspective is kind of what Lost Walks is all about. We have a very specific narrative tale that we think comes across, and we're trying to think of ways to always portray that as specifically as possible, but we always want people's reaction to this, and we want other artists' interpretation of it, bringing in people to design shirts or new sets. And we've talked about doing video, we've talked about furthering the narrative a little ways and find ways that we can work with people in that regard. So yeah, we just always want people's perspective in order to kind of move forward with the story.
Started writing the record, we decided that we wanted dance to be a part of it. Most of that was because of my history. I grew up as a dancer. So part of the hope with when Andy and I first started talking about what Lost Walks would become, I wanted to be a part of creating the songs that I would then set movement to and then dance to.
So we did think about the way that any type of the action would be portrayed, and without really having, actors portraying that, we knew that dance was a big part of that.
So that was part of how we started to write the thing, is that I wanted some music that felt like I could hear over and over again in a rehearsal. Also that felt really grounded and fluid, the way that my body likes to move.
But there's definitely times when we thought about how the characters would be moving, and we wrote parts based off that. So we definitely wrote specific parts of the music thinking about movement, and Jen and her team of dancers kind of took that and have really made it so the action is a little more explained, so the story is a little more enhanced. So it's been super important.
When we started kind of gathering the team of dancers, it was right after the election. A lot of folks that I would talk to, I was saying things like, this is a collaborative effort, and it's a project that we may not be getting paid for, and we're doing this for this other reason too. So hopefully it's a thing that you can feel happy with and get something out of it, but also know that we're kind of doing this for the wolves and for something a little bit bigger right now. And that felt like kind of the right timing for a lot of folks. I remember talking to people about the project and seeing if anybody would want to be involved, and they were saying something like, yeah, I really want to dance for something else, not just for myself. And the first probably 6 months or so was us just getting together every week and kind of talking about what the songs were about, and then doing a ton of improvising to hopefully come up with some choreography. When I was having heart surgery, actually, we had auditions for the dancers. I got this group of 7 dancers who all had very different backgrounds. We got them all together, and I said something like, I still want this to happen, but I can't do it for a little bit, and who else would be willing to kind of keep this going? And everyone kind of came together and made it happen.
Female Andy, she reached out to me and said that there's like this project that she was working on and she gave me like very little details and was like, come audition.
The dancers ended up having auditions while I was in the hospital.
Jen wasn't there, so it was very like unclear what I was auditioning for.
Andy Cole's one of the dancers. She came to the hospital and told me like, these are all the people who showed up and these are the people who seemed like they would be really into it.
It worked out really well. A few weeks later I met Jen, kind of fell in love with the project.
Within 4 weeks I was back in the studio with everybody and still kind of slowly going through this recovery, but having the chance to be in the studio with the dancers working on everything and then kind of like keep moving even though I was like not totally involved anymore, it just felt really good and it felt like the type of thing that could exist without me, and that was kind of what I wanted to know, that like could this thing keep going even if I weren't involved in the process anymore. That kind of showed me like we have an okay idea here because other people want to be involved even without me running things. When we were doing that improvising, there were lots of moments where I would give people some thoughts on what I would hope to see in the movement. Like I would say, let's imagine you're an animal that's trapped in a big metal trap. What does that do to your body and how can you still kind of move through the space?
Vague instruction is always challenging for a dancer especially. It's hard to portray either being a wolf or interacting with a wolf. I just kind of made it less of a wolf and more of like if I were experiencing the same things that these wolves experience, knowing like where wolves come from, like being very pack oriented and like not super individualized, what kind of emotions would they be feeling and why would they be feeling that way.
And then I would kind of watch everything for a little bit and then pull all these different ideas that people were coming up in their own bodies that would become a phrase. And then there were moments where I would bring a phrase to people and then say, let's do this, and then see what happens when you get it into your own bodies. So I feel like it was a pretty major collaborative effort. Like everyone had their own little piece, and if we really went back and looked at all the different things, it does feel like it was kind of how we would write a record. Especially now that we're in the second record, it feels a little bit more collaborative in the way that we get in the same space and we say like, okay, how is this all gonna work? And we just kind of go for it with a song and see what happens. And it does feel like that's how the dance was created as well. Like we all just got in the same space, listened to the song, talked about the story, and then came up with the movement. We're in this really interesting phase right now where we get to dig a little bit deeper now that the dancers have been doing this for about a year.
When we started, it was only about like learning movement. A year later, now we're back to the story.
We're getting to the place where we get to dig deeper into the story and what the movement means to go along with the story.
How do we portray that not only to us, but to the audience? Now we're creating movement around emotion and emotion around movement, and like that juxtaposition is really interesting and kind of fun to be part of that process too.
Just kind of fine-tune the movement and change it up a little bit and talk some more about it, so it feels like it's still an interesting part of the process where it's evolving still.
We always wanted Lost Walks to be kind of more than just a band.
I think having the dancers kind of tell the story through movement aids the words and the lyrics behind that. Just dancers in general can convey so many different emotions than just a musician on stage. It is more relevant to like what we're actually doing and what a role of a dancer is to like portray that emotion and that story.
do it. She's made a mess of things. By the time she was young, her string was already growing on these chains, all day rings. Oh no, how will I do it? How will I fix these things? Sucking water, gas chambers, light a match and burn the main, you hang them heavy 5-headed strings. When the time comes for forever, this time I'll be sure to get things right. Oh no, how does she do it? She never pays no mind to the chilling situation. Oh, the way that we are station is the food for life for a child. Oh no, how will I do it? How will I let them go? Throw the boat into the levee, pack the snow until it's heavy, and one will never know. Can you take it this far? You should know you're sinking down. Past the light of the day, through the dark of the earth, through these holes in the ground. Can you take it this far? You know there's no turning down. All these whales in the woods sing a whispered name, and they won't go away. When the time comes for redemption, I will deal with this deception. And when the crows come down for feeding, they'll see that the ground is bleeding. Scorched and searing, scratched and smothered. Here lies Dolly, child and mother.
Kind of heard about what the project was through David Thomas Bailey. I had never really gotten a chance to hear the music or find out what it was all about. He gave me a quick warning saying that, you know, we might be needing another guitar player because Trent Nelson might be having to step away. And I think like literally the next week he came back and said, that's definitely gonna happen. We're gonna go ahead and get you to audition for this. Trent had some gigs coming up where there was a potential that they could conflict with Lost Walks gigs, so they needed somebody that could jump in right at the last minute if need be. Just learned the tunes and did one night with Andy and Damien and Jen just to kind of read through all the stuff. Over the course of a month or two, I did a couple rehearsals. As time went on, it became obvious that Trent was gonna leave for sure, and I 100% kind of stepped in and really started to not just learn the tunes more in depth, I really kind of started to find ways of kind of making that material a little bit my own.
And I remember that practice when you were like, we were done with a song, you would like rip the sheet off and throw it on the floor, and I was super impressed with the fact that we kind of randomly said like, hey, maybe this would work out, we might need somebody, would you be willing to learn these songs? And then he came in so invested in it.
There became this sort of like, what would I do here if I had never heard somebody do something here? Like, how would I insert my own voice here without hearing Trent in my ear already? That was kind of a new experience for me, looking at really rigid composed music that was on a record and then having to like take it down and do my own thing with it.
We've talked a few times about it like evolving a lot since we started, and kind of the original mission of what we were doing, how that has even evolved. Ryan joining has been a part of that as well.
I really would have never myself like put a band like this together. It's totally very different than that, but in a way all of it still kind of clicks and speaks to like the way that I think and hear music when it comes to rock music anyways.
With a stare like a knife, maybe he's looking
I had never met anybody in the band other than Dave. I'd never even met Jen or Andy or anybody else in the band. First, I think it was just kind of like doing my job, showing up and playing the music. As I got more comfortable, I think, I kind of started to feel more comfortable being myself, more comfortable playing the way that I play, and at that point, I think I just kind of felt like I was hanging out with my friends.
When we first started, we had kind of a stricter guideline on how we wanted the narrative to come across. Like, we wanted it to be pretty vague. Now it feels a little bit more clear that we're okay, and we are actually hoping that people know what the story is, because that's also part of the intention, is reaching people and kind of sharing a different story of what is always known as the big bad wolf, and that we're hoping to do more of a story about like a misunderstood creature and reaching people.
Suffering down in this world,
Now that we've played in a few different settings, it feels like we're having more fun with each other. We're wanting to put this out there more, and we want to do it all the time. And if it were up to me, I would perform this thing every single night. Just is feeling really good, and it feels like we're on the right path. So we're thinking a little bit more outside of the box now, rather than having a space where we always get to be in there a few days early. So we're coming up with these kind of different variations of the show right now, so we can perform it a little bit more. We're in a little bit more of a looser place with that, where we're kind of wanting it to evolve. We're just kind of letting it be what it wants to be, giving it the space to evolve rather than sticking with the one idea that we had in the beginning, which is we can only be in theater spaces. And now we're realizing, like, no, we actually like just playing as a regular band, and it would be really awesome if we can always have the dancers and the artwork with us. And how do we evolve in a way that we can do it in all the different spaces with a bunch of different audience members?
Most of us come from rock band backgrounds, and that's something we talked about a lot early on, is we wanted this to be different. We wanted it to be viewed as when we play it was an event. But there's still some of that, I think, at everyone's core, that we understand we're a rock band, and with that comes, it's not always going to be the full experience. But we want to make sure that we're still playing rock shows as a rock band, where I think we're still trying to work on ways to have those performances and still inferring that we have some different things about us, if that is the dancers or the stage set. That's been a bit of a challenge, but I think it's something that we're conceptualizing and working on. Is we're a rock band at our core, but we have these other elements. So when we're just playing our music, like, how do we portray that to other people? So that's something that we're working on with the artistic team and with the dancers, to kind of inform more of the action when we're just playing as a rock band.
All of this feels good for those of us who are part of the project. Like, I really like hanging out with my buddies. I like hanging out with all the dancers. It's very fulfilling for me to be a part of this project for my own personal reasons. If we can make something that other people are interested in, then that's also part of our goal, right? Is to be reaching the people.
It's not an ending of one thing, it's an extension of what we've been trying to do this whole time.
The story and the music and the dancing and just kind of the whole piece of everything is important, because I think there's not much like that happening in Denver right now. I think it's unique in that aspect. It's just a very artistic endeavor. When you take all of the pieces, all the performers, all the dancers, it's just really unique in that sense. And so I feel like people need to hear it for that reason.
I felt when I joined Last Walks that I needed an outlet for dance, and this was kind of it. I started getting to know Jen and Andy and other dancers, and really felt like this was kind of like a calling of like what I needed emotionally was being met. The project itself, I think, does that for not only the Wolves, but also for the other like band members and dancers in it as well as the people that we serve by performing. It kind of gives them a glimpse of everybody needs something, and it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to reach out and say, like, this is where things are lacking. I think we've done that as a project a few times of like, we need funds or we need venues, we need supplies. Like, it's okay to ask for those things, and I think it's more than just about helping something that can't speak for itself. Being able to speak for yourself, it's kind of like empowered me in that whole situation.
Thinking about kind of all the trappings of the music industry and kind of all the pitfalls and the things that would really frustrate me in the past, I don't worry about those things as much with Lost Walks because the process and the art itself is kind of fulfilling on its own.
It was really awesome to be a part of something like that, intentionally artistic, but with people that are my friends. And that our creativity, my creativity, is part of what's happening here. And I remember even when we were dress rehearsing for our first show at the Dancers, just watching them, you know, I mean, we were just sitting out there waiting, and we played the album and they were dancing to the album, just warming up, and it was really cool. It's just something I've never been a part of as long as I've been in the music industry in Denver, you know? It's a really cool thing. And I think it's genuine. This is real. We're not trying to sell beer as a band. We're being artistic and creative and bringing a story to people.
I feel like it gives us a really good chance for us to work on things together. You know, we're husband and wife, and it's cool to be at this point in our relationship and work on something that means so much to us together and gives us a chance to collaborate with our friends and spend more time with our friends, and we all share the same goal and share the same artistry, and it's really cool to be able to do that together.
Since probably May, I've listened to that record and practiced along with it sometimes 2 or 3 times a week. It never feels like a chore. At no point am I like, okay, let's turn that fucking record on.
I think that's what is cool about the project, that it feels like we can keep going with things, and we can keep digging deeper and deeper, and something new is coming out of it every time we have a discussion about what the record is. We talk about what the movement is. We talk about how to pull off the music bit of everything. I feel the same way, and without sounding like a blowhard on my own project, I'm I fucking love this project.
The threats to tear apart my ever drifting mind.
Yeah, I couldn't be happier with the community that we have, that we've kind of built around this. And I remember DTB saying at that show, we did kind of a pre-show meetup where we just all got together and took a moment to remind ourselves why we were there. For whatever reason that is, if it's personal, it's about the community, it's about the Wolves, whatever it is, that we're here doing this all together. And DTB said something like, man, I'll tell you one thing, Lost Walks does community right. The feeling I get from it is I'm just really excited that it feels like people are so invested in it and kind of get it without us having to always articulate why. Yeah. And that we've built this little community around it, and that's the shit that makes me feel even more excited.
I can speak on the community aspect of Lost Walks, which has been nice. I mean, we have such a big team that it's a community in and of itself because it's so many people involved in the process. And I've always been in projects and wanted people to contribute in any way possible because I've been in bands where I didn't feel like I was heard or felt like I had any real contribution. So when you bring in 20-something people and everyone has their specific roles, but you want everyone to feel like their role is a very important role. I want everyone to know that this is all part of something that's maybe bigger than the individual parts, and it wouldn't be what it is without all those parts. So I think we have to, we have to influence a good amount of community and have those conversations in order to make people feel valuable. And I want to continue to do that with Lost Walks.
Yeah, I think it's a thing we don't get to say enough. Mm-hmm. I think because we're always working, kind of running for our lives to make sure that the show is happening and that things get done. Mm. I always feel like there's not enough time to really to articulate how thankful we really are that people are so invested and working on it all together. Because it's so true. With every person that's involved, it makes it happen. There's no way this would happen without the crew we have.
I have this weird theory that the less you start to get thanked, the deeper you are into something. As a community, we don't have to always thank everyone around us because it's part of, we're all doing this together, so we're all appreciative of each other's work. And if you're being explicitly overly thanked, maybe that means that you're not as involved in the process as like you should be. So I want everyone to feel included, and like we're all doing work for each other, as opposed to certain people being appreciative of people outside of like the inner circle.
I think, yeah, it's cool that we get to just continue to do the thing that we like, and I think we could always go back to like, but where is this going, and what are we doing with it, and what does it mean for all of us? And now that we have all these people involved, like how do we support everybody in it and keep it going? And then I always kind of come back to home where I'm like, but I'm just still so happy, and it seems like everybody else is. Like, I'm just happy to do the thing. Every time maybe one of the dancers says something about like, I wanted to do this type of engineering, but then I'm like considering maybe environmental type stuff. And every time we meet somebody or anybody who's involved in the project and they consider any type of, real life stuff that maybe Lost Walks has influenced at all, it just kind of like breaks my heart in the best way, where I'm like, this is great to have some type of influence on each other. So I just thought it was going to be a cool self-serving way for me to get what I needed in the moment, which was like, if I can't dance anymore, then I want to at least create dance to music that I can be a part of. So the fact that it's then kind of naturally evolved into this thing where like we also then get to kind of take with us like other new artists and other people who are working on different things. That's been a surprising aspect of this that I didn't know was going to happen, that we would get to like see other people evolve in ways that I didn't expect.
So I was surprised that anyone under the age of 30 who's not a bearded dude actually likes a band that I'm a part of. So that's the only people who've liked music that I've put out the past 10 years.
Although the work itself is still a really fun process, like it hasn't gotten old yet to work on the dancing and to practice the same songs over and over again. I still like doing that work. But it's also really fun when we get to have these moments where we get to just kind of hang out and reflect on what it's all about. And I think, because Andy and I live together, we have a lot of moments where we get to do that together, but then there's not a ton of time where we get to do that in rehearsal or in practice, where we get to actually say out loud, like, holy shit, I can't believe that, I'm lucky enough to be able to work with a crew on something like this that feels so essentially right for me right now.
Hey, let 'em in. Why let 'em in? Hey, let 'em in. Why let 'em in? Hey, let 'em in. Why let 'em in? Hey, let 'em in. Why let 'em in?
I would like it to reach larger, different audiences than any band I've ever been in before. I think we'd like to have it turn into a full performance that can be at a big performing arts center, that can be in front of a crowd that would generally go see those types of things. So, I don't know if the fans of Hamilton are going to be into Wolf Woman Man, but I think that's our ultimate goal, is to kind of have it be more far-reaching than anything we've done before, and kind of live outside of the rock clubs that we're kind of traditionally used to playing in.
Yeah, we wanted to only be in theater spaces, and we felt like that was the only home for us. And now I feel like I want this to be on the moon. Like, I want to be able to take this everywhere and be successful and have all the elements. And if there's a way for us to figure out how to do it, and I feel like we've got the team, we've got the people who are really invested and are interested in making this work and are really creative in coming up with solutions. I feel like we could have a chance in making it still have all the elements that feel important to us: the dance, the artwork, the wolves, the music. I think we could make it happen now. So I think the future hopefully is more. Like, we just get to do it more often.
Whether we're opening a festival or opening a 4-band bill or doing our entire performance at a non-traditional space, I think the goal is to reach as many people as possible. And that's something we we kind of reimagined halfway through when we had an idea to always do the full performance at a specific space. We realized that was limiting to the number of people that could see us. So we started to think ways to get as many eyes on us as possible was to go back to the rock band ethos of playing and opening for people, and that's how you get fans. With the understanding that if you liked us opening for Amigo the Devil at the Marquee Theater, we also do this other performance that's a larger version of it or a longer version of it. And maybe the people who liked us opening the rock band show will like that version of us, but maybe the people who are more into the theatrical side of things will appreciate us for those things. So, you know, not that we're trying to be everything to everyone, but I think we're trying to open that up so we can get more people and play a lot more often with a band that we all really like playing in.
At its core for me, I would want to do this every single night. I think it's a real blast to be able to play in this band and to play with the people that are around us and kind of surround ourselves with this crew. It's been a really fun process. And if there's any chance for us doing it more often, I want that. And it's also kind of going back to the core of another part of why we're doing this is to reach more people and educate folks on what's going on with wolves. So if there's just a different access point, and whether that's, like Andy said, an opening slot, or if it's our big production where we have a full beer pairing with 2 local breweries and we have a food pairing one day and we do all the different things, whatever it is, I'm hoping that we can reach more people with kind of the collaborative process. Every day gets deeper. When I go back and listen to the radio spot that we did right before our first show ever 2 years ago.
This is Into the Wilderness, off the first album from new Denver band Lost Walks. Over the length of 10 tracks, a gothic-like story unfolds in a remote mountainous area. It's called Wolf, Woman, Man, and it's the brainchild of husband and wife team Andy Thomas and Jen Gannon. You can hear the new concept album during its debut performance at Syntax Physic Opera in Denver next Friday. Andy and Jen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We talked about, in the interview, a lot about the wolf education piece and then a lot about what we wanted to do with it in the future. So there was a kind of a moment where we said something like, maybe eventually we'll have dancers and movement set to everything.
Jen, you're also a dancer and choreographer.
Right.
So what are your hopes for this album down the road? Do you envision it as a larger theatrical production in the form of a musical or a rock opera?
Absolutely, yeah. That was part of why we started this, was I was using a lot of local music for one of my old dance companies. And we were thinking one day we should write our own music so we could eventually put movement to that. So I've gathered some dancers and we're already starting to talk about what movement would look like for this. But yeah, eventually we want to have a huge production with movement and more artwork and gather more of our friends and artists to work with us on this. It is happening now. And yeah, without it sounding corny, like what will Lost Walks do next? But like if we all have this thing where it feels like it's working for us and it feels like it's still exciting, like really what is going to happen next? It does kind of feel like maybe we can give a bit of a nod to like what we've done, where we thought we were going to be 2 years ago, and now we're here, and what does that mean in the future? Like Andy and I were talking this morning about how, you know, we already have plans for 2 prequels, the prequel before this record and then the one before that. What will that be like when we're done with that? And then the other night in practice we came up with an idea for after Wolf, Woman, Man and how we're going to write that record. And yeah, it feels a bit like we have so much work we can do on this thing that I can't say where it's going to go, but I can say that I'm really fucking happy with where it is right now. almost anything alive. It's the littlest, my young one, that drives me, I guess. I don't like hurting small things, but we like hunger less. Saved us. Now I'll wear your hide with wit and bewilderment. Wild wolf woman, I'll gnash my teeth at anything